Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to a story that's about to shake you to your core. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. New York, London, Lagos. I love connecting with you all across the world. And hey, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this story. It'll stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Now, let me ask you something. What would you do if the child you loved more than life itself wasn't actually yours? This is the story of a billionaire who thought he had everything figured out, until one moment in his own nursery shattered the foundation of his entire world. Present day, Manhattan penthouse, 7:47 a.m. Julian Bourne wasn't a man who panicked. He had built empires from blueprints, negotiated with presidents, survived hostile takeovers that would have destroyed weaker men. Control was his oxygen. Precision was his religion. But as he stood frozen in the doorway of his son's nursery, every instinct in his body screamed that something was catastrophically wrong. The girl, barely 20, wearing the gray housekeeping uniform with the name tag that read Amara Strider, was holding his baby, not hovering near the crib, not adjusting blankets, holding him, cradling 6-month-old Ethan against her shoulder like she had every right in the world, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Julian's throat tightened, his fists clenched at his sides. Ethan, his miracle baby. The child he and his late wife had fought 3 years of fertility treatments to conceive, the boy who had been his only light since Caroline's death 8 months ago, never let strangers hold him. Not the nannies, not Caroline's parents, not even Julian's own brother. Ethan would wail, twist, claw at anyone who wasn't Julian or the night nurse, Mrs. Pemberton, who had been with them since the hospital. But now Ethan was silent, calm, peaceful. His tiny hand was clutching the fabric of Amara's uniform, his head resting against her collarbone as if he'd found home. And she was humming, a low, trembling melody that sounded like a lullaby from another world, soft, mournful, achingly familiar in a way Julian couldn't place. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice cut through the room like a blade. Amara's entire body went rigid. Her eyes, deep brown, rimmed with exhaustion and something far older than her years, snapped toward him. But she didn't look guilty. She looked shattered. Her voice broke. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if fighting back tears that had been waiting far too long to fall. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I heard him crying and I—" "You what?" Julian's voice was ice. "You walked into my private residence, picked up my son without permission, and you think an apology covers that?" He took a step forward, his mind already running through protocols, security breaches, background checks, lawsuits. How had she even gotten past the security on this floor? The housekeeping staff weren't supposed to be in the penthouse during family hours. "Put him down, now." Amara's hands trembled as she carefully, gently, lowered Ethan back into the crib, but the moment she released him, her knees buckled. She grabbed the railing of the crib to steady herself, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Julian's anger flickered. Something was wrong here. Deeply, viscerally wrong. This wasn't the reaction of someone caught stealing. This was the reaction of someone whose entire world was collapsing. "Look at me," Julian demanded, his voice quieter now, but no less commanding. Amara turned. Tears streaked down her face, but she wasn't sobbing. She wasn't begging. She was just breaking. "I didn't mean to." She pressed a hand against her chest, as if trying to hold something inside that was tearing her apart. I heard him crying through the door, and the sound, the exact sound, her voice cracked. It was the same cry. Julian's brow furrowed. The same. What are you talking about? Amara closed her eyes, and when she spoke again, her words came out like a confession she'd been holding in a locked room for years. 2 years ago, I had a son. The air in the room shifted. Julian stood completely still. His name was Samuel, she whispered. He was 4 months old when they took him from me. I was 17, alone. They said I was too young, too poor, that he deserved better. They said it was temporary, just until I got on my feet. But when I went back, her breath hitched. He was gone, sent overseas, adopted. They wouldn't tell me where, wouldn't tell me who, just gone. Julian's chest tightened. And yesterday, Amara continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I was cleaning the hallway outside this room when I heard your baby cry. Not just any cry, a very specific one. The same hitch in his breath, the same trembling pitch, the exact sound my son made the last time I held him. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Julian. So I came inside. I know I shouldn't have. I know, but I just needed to see. Her voice failed completely. Julian's pulse hammered in his ears. See what? Amara's hand shook as she pointed toward the crib, toward Ethan. The birthmark, she whispered, on his left shoulder blade, dark brown, shaped like a crescent moon. Julian's blood turned to ice, because Ethan did have that birthmark, and Julian had never mentioned it to anyone outside immediate family. Amara's next words came out broken, raw, impossible. Mr. Bourne, I think your son is mine. Julian Bourne had faced boardroom assassins, market crashes, and the devastating loss of his wife during childbirth complications. He had learned to compartmentalize grief, to function through pain, to make impossible decisions with surgical precision. But standing in his son's nursery, staring at a trembling housekeeper who had just spoken the most insane words he'd ever heard, every wall he'd built came crashing down. That's not possible. His voice sounded hollow, even to his own ears. Amara wiped her face with the back of her hand, steadying herself against the crib. I know how it sounds. I know. But please, just look at the paperwork, the dates, the adoption agency you used. Julian's jaw clenched. How do you know which agency I used? Because I recognize the facilitator's name. Her voice was barely a whisper now. Dr. Raymond Chen, International Child Welfare Alliance. He was the same man who processed my son's case in my country, the same man who promised me I'd see Samuel again once I got stable. The name hit Julian like a freight train. Dr. Raymond Chen, the charitable director his foundation had partnered with for 3 years, the man who had personally helped Julian navigate the adoption process after Caroline's death, when he'd been drowning in grief and desperate to give Ethan the love Caroline had died bringing into the world. No. That doesn't prove anything, Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Birthmarks are common. Cries sound similar. You're grieving, and I'm sorry for your loss, but you can't just— I have his baby blanket. Amara's words cut through his denial. The one they let me keep. It has his hospital tag still sewn into the corner. Date of birth, March 15th, 2 years ago. Location, Kigali General Hospital, Rwanda. Julian's world tilted. Ethan's adoption papers listed his birth date as March 18th, just 3 days later. Birth location, private facility, East Africa, mother deceased during childbirth. That's what Dr. Chen had told him. That's what the documents said. A tragic case, an orphaned infant who needed a home, a grieving father who needed purpose, a perfect match. Except now, standing before him, was a woman claiming to be the deceased mother, very much alive, very much broken. Julian's hand moved to his phone instinctively, but Amara stepped forward, her voice desperate. "Please don't call security yet. Please, just let me show you something." Against every logical instinct, Julian nodded. Amara reached into the pocket of her uniform with shaking hands and pulled out a small, worn photograph, creased and faded from being held too many times. She held it out to him. Julian took it. The image showed a teenage girl, unmistakably Amara, younger, fuller-faced, holding a newborn baby against her chest in a hospital bed. The infant was wrapped in a pale blue blanket, his tiny face peaceful, his small hand curled near his chin, and on his visible shoulder, just barely in frame, was a crescent-shaped birthmark. Julian's breath caught. "I was 17 when I had him," Amara said quietly. "My parents had died the year before in the genocide aftershocks. I was living in a refugee transition camp, working odd jobs, barely surviving. When I got pregnant, the aid workers told me I qualified for support. Housing, medical care, job training. They said they wanted to help." Her voice hardened. "But after Samuel was born, everything changed. They said the living conditions weren't suitable for an infant, that I was showing signs of postpartum depression, that temporary foster care was in his best interest while I completed their program." Julian's throat tightened. He'd heard these stories before. Exploitation disguised as charity, vulnerable mothers pressured into surrendering children. He'd donated millions to prevent exactly that. "I signed papers I didn't fully understand," Amara continued. "They were in English, and my English was limited. I thought I was agreeing to temporary care, 6 months, maybe a year. But when I went back," her voice cracked again, "they told me Samuel had been legally adopted, that I'd signed away my rights, that he was in America now, with a good family, and I should be grateful he'd have opportunities I never could have given him." She looked directly into Julian's eyes, and the raw pain there was undeniable. "I tried to fight it, but I had no money, no lawyer, no proof beyond this photo and a baby blanket. The agency threatened to have me deported if I caused trouble. So I saved everything I had, applied for a work visa, and came here. I've been cleaning offices and apartments for 18 months, searching for any trace of International Child Welfare Alliance, any lead on where my son might be." She gestured toward the nursery with a trembling hand. "I got placed with this housekeeping company 3 weeks ago. When I saw the foundation plaque in your lobby, your partnership with IQA, I thought maybe I could find records, names, something. But I never imagined—" Her voice broke completely. "I never imagined my son would be here, in the home where I clean floors." Julian's mind raced through every conversation he'd had with Dr. Chen, every document he'd signed, every assurance he'd been given that the adoption was ethical, legal, clean. "If this is true," he said slowly, "if any of this is true, then Dr. Chen committed fraud, international child trafficking. He deceived both of us." Amara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not here to take your son from you, Mr. Bourne. I can see you love him. I can see he's cared for. But I need to know the truth. I need to know if the baby I've been mourning for 2 years is sleeping 20 feet from where I vacuum your floors." In the crib, Ethan stirred, making a small sound. Both of them looked down at him, and Julian saw, perhaps for the first time, not just his son, but a mystery wrapped in innocence, A child caught between two worlds, two parents, two truths that couldn't coexist. "I need time," Julian said finally. "Time to verify your story, to investigate the agency, to—" "I understand," Amara whispered, "but please, don't make me disappear. Don't send me away before we know." Julian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a threat, but a mother, just like Caroline had been, just like he was now a father. "I won't," he said quietly. "But if you're lying, I'm not." The certainty in her voice shook him more than anything else, because deep down, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge yet, Julian was starting to believe her. Julian spent the next 72 hours doing what he did best, investigating. He canceled meetings, postponed conference calls, delegated responsibilities to his executive team with vague excuses about personal matters that sent the rumor mill spinning but kept the truth buried, because the truth was too volatile to risk leaking, too dangerous to speak aloud. He hired a private investigator, not through his usual corporate channels, but through a discreet contact who specialized in international adoption fraud. A woman named Regina Moss, who'd spent 15 years exposing corrupt facilitators and reuniting stolen children with their families. When Regina arrived at his penthouse on the third evening, her expression was grim. "You're not going to like what I found," she said, dropping a thick folder onto his desk. Julian's stomach twisted. "Tell me." Regina opened the folder, revealing documents, photographs, and highlighted timelines that painted a picture far darker than he'd imagined. "International Child Welfare Alliance is a front," she began. "Dr. Raymond Chen has been operating a sophisticated child trafficking network for at least 7 years, targeting vulnerable mothers in post-conflict regions: Rwanda, Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, Yemen. He identifies women who are young, isolated, grieving, desperate." She slid a document across the desk. "He offers them support, housing, medical care, job training. But there's always a catch. They're required to place their infants in temporary care while they complete his programs. Except the programs are designed to fail. Impossible requirements, endless bureaucratic loops. And while the mothers are jumping through hoops, their babies are being fast-tracked into international adoptions." Julian's hands clenched into fists. "And the adoptive parents?" "People like you," Regina said quietly. "Wealthy, well-meaning, desperate for children, people who trust the system because they have no reason not to. Chen provides them with falsified documents, forged death certificates for the mothers, fabricated abandonment stories, whatever narrative fits. The adoptions appear completely legal on paper." She pulled out another document, a death certificate with a familiar name. Amara Strider. Date of death, March 16th, 2 years ago. Cause, postpartum hemorrhage. Julian's blood ran cold. "She's supposed to be dead," Regina said. "According to your adoption records, Ethan's biological mother died 2 days after giving birth. But Amara Strider is very much alive, which means someone forged this certificate, someone with access to official government records." "Chen," Julian whispered. Regina nodded. "He has connections in multiple countries, corrupt officials, paid-off clerks, bureaucrats willing to look the other way for the right price. He's been doing this for years, and he's gotten away with it because his clients are powerful people who would never suspect they're complicit in trafficking." Julian felt sick. Every donation he'd made to ICWA, every public endorsement, every glowing recommendation he'd written for Chen's humanitarian work. He'd helped build this monster's reputation. "How many children?" Julian asked, his voice hoarse. At least 43 confirmed cases, Regina said. Probably more. Amara's son, if Ethan is indeed her son, would be one of the earliest. If? Julian looked up sharply. You think she might be lying? Regina hesitated. I think her story checks out. The dates align. The hospital records from Kigali show a baby boy born to Amara Strider on March 15th, matching Ethan's physical description and birthmark documentation. But without DNA confirmation, we can't be certain. Julian's mind raced. A DNA test would take weeks, and if word gets out before we have answers, it would destroy you, Regina finished bluntly. The media would have a field day. Your foundation's credibility would evaporate. Chen would disappear before authorities could arrest him, and Amara could be deported or worse. So what do I do? Regina leaned forward, her eyes intense. You have two choices. Walk away, pay Amara off, bury the evidence, protect your reputation. Plenty of people in your position would choose that route. Or you blow this whole thing wide open. Expose Chen, cooperate with international authorities, accept whatever consequences come, legal battles, custody disputes, public scrutiny. It won't be clean, it won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. Before Julian could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Pemberton, the night nurse. Mr. Bourne, there's someone at the service entrance asking for you. Says her name is Amara. She seems distressed. Julian's heart hammered. She's here. He found Amara in the building's back hallway, her face pale, her hands shaking as she clutched a manila envelope. I'm sorry to come unannounced, she said quickly. But I needed to show you something before it's too late. Too late for what? Amara thrust the envelope toward him. I went back to the Refugee Services office where I first met Dr. Chen. I told them I needed copies of my original intake paperwork, said I was applying for permanent residency and needed documentation. Julian opened the envelope. Inside were forms, signatures, timestamps, and one document that made his blood turn to ice, a consent form, signed by Amara. But the English translation attached to it was completely different from the French original. The French version, I consent to temporary foster care for my son, Samuel Strider, for a period not to exceed 6 months, with the understanding that I will retain all parental rights and custody will be returned upon completion of the Housing Stability Program. The English version, I voluntarily relinquish all parental rights to my son, Samuel Strider, and consent to his immediate placement for international adoption. He changed it, Amara whispered. Dr. Chen changed the translation. I never agreed to give up my son. I never signed away my rights. He stole him and made it look legal. Julian stared at the documents, rage and horror flooding through him in equal measure. This wasn't a gray area. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. There's more, Amara said, her voice breaking. I called the number on Dr. Chen's old business card. The office is closed. The phone's disconnected. I searched online. ICWA's website is gone. He's shutting everything down. Regina's words echoed in Julian's mind. Chen would disappear before authorities could arrest him. He knows, Julian said quietly. Somehow he knows we're investigating. Amara's eyes filled with tears. If he runs, we'll never prove what he did. We'll never get justice. And I'll never know for certain if Ethan is my Samuel. Julian looked at her, this brave, broken woman who'd crossed an ocean searching for her stolen child, and made his decision. Then we don't let him run, he said. Regina. The investigator appeared in the doorway. Get me everything, flight records, bank transactions, known associates, and contact Interpol. I want Dr. Raymond Chen found and arrested before he leaves the country." Regina nodded sharply and disappeared. Julian turned back to Amara. "We're doing the DNA test tonight. And whatever the results say, we're taking Chen down." For the first time since entering his home, Amara smiled through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered, but Julian knew the hardest part was still ahead. Because if the DNA test confirmed what he was starting to believe, everything he thought he knew about his son, about his family, about his life, was built on a lie, and the truth would shatter them all. The DNA test took 48 hours. 48 hours of Julian pacing his penthouse like a caged animal, checking his phone every 10 minutes, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except the tiny vial of Ethan's saliva sitting in a laboratory somewhere, holding the answer to a question that would change everything. He'd arranged for Amara to stay in one of the guest suites, partly to keep her close, partly because he couldn't stomach the thought of her returning to whatever cramped apartment she'd been surviving in while cleaning his floors. She'd protested at first, uncomfortable accepting his charity. But when he'd looked at her and said, "If Ethan is your son, then you've already lost 2 years with him. I won't make you lose another day," she'd quietly accepted. Now, on the second evening, Julian found himself standing outside her door, hesitating before knocking. "Come in," her soft voice called. He entered to find her sitting by the window, staring out at the Manhattan skyline with Ethan's baby blanket, the one from the photograph, clutched in her hands. "Can't sleep either?" Julian asked. Amara shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes I see him, my Samuel, the way he looked the last time I held him. 4 months old. He had just started smiling. These big, gummy grins that made everything feel possible, even when we had nothing." She traced the edge of the blanket with her thumb. "I used to sing to him at night, the same lullaby my mother sang to me before she died. I'd hold him close and promise him that no matter what happened, I'd keep him safe, that I'd never let anyone take him from me." Her voice cracked. "And then I let them. I signed their papers. I trusted their promises. I failed him." "No," Julian said firmly, surprising himself with the intensity of his tone. He crossed the room and sat down across from her. "You didn't fail him. You were 17, alone, traumatized, and manipulated by professionals who knew exactly how to exploit your vulnerability. Chen failed him. The system failed him. But you fought. You're still fighting." Amara looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "What if the test says he's not mine? What if I've built this all up in my head because I want so desperately to believe—" "Then we'll deal with that," Julian interrupted gently. "But, Amara, I've seen the documents, I've seen the forged death certificate, I've seen how the dates align, and I've watched how Ethan responds to you." He paused, his throat tightening. "My son has never been comfortable with strangers. Never. But when you held him that first day, he was at peace, like he recognized something, like he remembered." "Babies don't remember," Amara whispered. "Not at 4 months old." "Maybe not consciously," Julian said, "but maybe some part of him knows. Maybe some part of him has been waiting for you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, impossible, terrifying. "Can I ask you something?" Amara said after a long silence. "About Ethan's mother, your wife." Julian's chest tightened, but he nodded. "Caroline," he said quietly. "She died 8 months ago. Complications during delivery. They tried everything, but she didn't make it." "I'm so sorry," Amara said, genuine compassion in her voice. "That must have been unbearable." "It was," Julian admitted. "Still is. Some days I wake up and forget she's gone." I reach for her side of the bed and it's empty, and the grief hits me all over again like the first time. He ran a hand through his hair. When they placed Ethan in my arms, I made him a promise. I promised him that even though his mother, even though Caroline, couldn't be here, I would love him enough for both of us, that I would give him everything, protect him from everything, be everything he needed. His voice broke. And now I don't even know if he's legally mine, if the adoption is valid, if I have any right to— "Stop," Amara said firmly. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "Listen to me, Julian. No matter what that test says, you are his father. You've raised him. You've loved him. You've been there for every middle-of-the-night cry, every doctor's appointment, every milestone. That doesn't disappear because of some paperwork." "But if he's your son, then we figure it out," Amara said. "Together. Because he needs both of us. He needs the father who's been there, and if he's Samuel, he needs the mother who never stopped looking." Julian stared at her, something shifting in his chest. This woman, this stranger who'd walked into his life 4 days ago, understood him in a way no one else had since Caroline died. She understood loss. She understood love. She understood what it meant to hold a child and know you'd burn the world down to keep them safe. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Regina Moss. His hand trembled as he answered. "Tell me." "We found Chen," Regina said. "He's booked on a flight to Singapore tomorrow morning. Private charter. I've alerted Interpol and the FBI. They're moving to intercept him at Teterboro Airport before takeoff." "Good," Julian said, his jaw clenched. "What about the other families? The other children?" "We've identified 17 adoptive families in the U.S. alone, all connected to IQA, all with similar paperwork discrepancies. Julian, this is going to explode. When the arrests happen, when the media gets wind—" "I don't care about the media," Julian said. "Those families deserve to know the truth. Those mothers deserve their children back." "Even if it means losing Ethan?" The question hit like a bullet. Julian looked at Amara, who was watching him with wide, terrified eyes. "Even then," he said quietly, "because it's the right thing to do." Regina was silent for a moment. "You're a good man, Julian Bourne. The test results will be ready by morning. I'll send them as soon as they come through." She hung up. Julian set down his phone and met Amara's gaze. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "Tomorrow we'll know." Amara nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Julian reached across the space between them and took her hand. Not as a billionaire and a housekeeper, not as strangers caught in an impossible situation, but as two people bound together by love for the same child. Two people about to discover whether that love would unite them or tear them apart forever. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. Julian was already awake, standing in Ethan's nursery, watching his son sleep peacefully in the soft morning light. He'd been there for hours, memorizing every detail of Ethan's face, the curve of his cheeks, the way his tiny fists curled near his chin, the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. His phone buzzed. His heart stopped. Subject: DNA analysis results. Confidential. His hand shook so violently he almost dropped the phone. He steadied himself against the crib, his breath coming in short gasps. This was it, the moment that would either confirm his worst fear or grant him reprieve from a nightmare. He opened the attachment. The technical language blurred before his eyes, alleles, genetic markers, probability percentages, until he reached the conclusion at the bottom of the page. Combined paternity index, 99.99997%. Conclusion: Amara Strider is the biological mother of the child known as Ethan Bourne. The phone slipped from Julian's fingers and clattered to the floor. The world tilted. His knees buckled, and he gripped the crib railing to keep from collapsing. Ethan, his son. The child he'd held every night for 8 months, the baby he'd rocked through fevers and nightmares, the boy he'd promised Caroline he would protect forever. Wasn't his, had never been his, was stolen. A choked sound escaped his throat, something between a sob and a scream that he barely managed to stifle before it woke Ethan. "Julian?" He spun around to find Amara standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes searching his expression for the answer she already knew. "It's him," Julian whispered, his voice raw. "The test. You were right. Ethan is Samuel." Amara's hands flew to her mouth. A strangled cry broke free as her legs gave out and she crumpled to the floor, her entire body shaking with sobs that had been trapped inside her for 2 years. "My baby," she gasped between breaths. "My Samuel. Oh, God, my baby." Julian watched her break apart, and something inside him shattered too, because her joy was his devastation. Her reunion was his loss. Her answered prayers were his worst nightmare come true. He'd just found out he was going to lose his son, and she'd just found out she'd been cleaning the floors of the home where her stolen child slept. For 3 weeks she'd been 20 feet away from him, vacuuming hallways while her baby cried, scrubbing counters while her son laughed, invisible, exploited, powerless, while the man who unknowingly raised her child lived in luxury built partially on the same corrupt system that had stolen Samuel from her arms. "I'm sorry," Julian heard himself say, though he didn't know what he was apologizing for. For adopting her son? For not knowing? For the universe's cruel irony? Amara looked up at him through her tears, and instead of anger, he saw understanding. "You didn't know," she whispered. "You loved him. You kept him safe when I couldn't. But now—" Julian's voice cracked. "Now what happens? Legally, morally, I have no claim to him. He's your son. You have every right to take him and walk out of here, and I would have no grounds to stop you." Amara pushed herself up from the floor, wiping her face. She crossed the room slowly, her eyes fixed on the crib, where Ethan, Samuel, still slept peacefully, unaware that his entire world had just been rewritten. She reached down with trembling hands and gently brushed a finger across his forehead. "I've dreamed of this moment for 2 years," she said softly, holding him again, hearing him call me Mama. "Getting back everything that was stolen from me?" Julian's heart clenched painfully. "But I'm not cruel," Amara continued, her voice stronger now. "And I'm not blind. I can see how much you love him. I can see the grief in your eyes that matches mine. You lost your wife. You thought you were giving a home to an orphan. You're a victim of Chen's lies, just like I am." She turned to face him, tears still streaming down her face. "I don't want to rip him away from the only father he's ever known. That would just be creating a different kind of trauma. But I also can't walk away. Not again. Not after everything." "Then what do we do?" Julian asked desperately. Before Amara could answer, Julian's phone, still on the floor, buzzed repeatedly. He picked it up to find a series of urgent texts from Regina. Regina: "Chen arrested at airport 20 minutes ago." Regina: "FBI raiding Iqua offices now." Regina: "Media already picking up the story. You need to prepare." Regina: "Julian, there are reporters outside your building." Julian's stomach dropped. He rushed to the window and looked down at the street below. News vans, cameras, a growing crowd of journalists. "No," he breathed, "not yet. We're not ready." His phone rang. his lawyer, then his publicist, then his brother, then the foundation's board chairman. Within minutes, Julian's carefully controlled world erupted into chaos. The story broke across every major outlet within the hour. Billionaire's adopted son at center of international trafficking ring. Humanitarian doctor arrested in child theft scheme. 17 families discover children were stolen, not orphaned, and the detail that made Julian's blood run cold. Biological mother found working as housekeeper in adoptive father's home. They had Amara's name. They had Ethan's photo. They had everything. Julian's phone exploded with calls, messages, demands for statements. His lawyer was already talking about custody battles, legal precedents, international jurisdiction. His publicist was crafting damage control strategies. His foundation's board was panicking about liability and reputation. But all Julian could focus on was Amara, standing by Ethan's crib, finally reunited with her son, while the entire world watched and waited to see which parent would win and which would lose. Because that's what everyone expected. A battle, a custody war, a winner and a loser. But as Julian looked at Amara, this brave, broken, beautiful woman who'd crossed an ocean to find her child, he realized something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. He didn't want to fight her. He wanted to fight with her. "Amara," he said quietly, cutting through the noise of his ringing phone, "I have an idea, but you're going to have to trust me." She met his eyes, searching for deception and finding only desperate hope. "What kind of idea?" Julian took a breath. "What if we don't let them make us enemies? What if we refuse to play their game? What if instead of fighting over Ethan—" He paused, the words feeling impossible and yet absolutely right. "What if we raise him together?" The proposal hung in the air between them like a lifeline, fragile, impossible, and yet the only path forward that didn't destroy them both. Amara stared at Julian, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Together? You mean co-parenting?" "I mean whatever it takes to give Ethan, Samuel, both of his parents," Julian said. "He needs you, but he also needs stability. And like it or not, I'm the only stability he's known. We can figure out the details, but Amara, I'm not going to let lawyers turn this into a war where he's the casualty." For a moment, hope flickered in Amara's eyes. Then Julian's phone rang again. His lawyer, Gerald Hutchins, a shark in a suit who'd built his career on winning impossible cases. "Don't answer it," Amara whispered, as if she already knew what was coming. But Julian had to. He pressed accept. "Julian, listen to me very carefully." Gerald's voice was urgent, clinical. "Do not make any statements. Do not make any agreements, especially not with Amara Strider. I'm filing an emergency motion this afternoon to maintain your custody rights based on—" "Gerald, stop!" "She has no legal standing in this country. Her parental rights were terminated under Rwandan law, even if the process was fraudulent. We can argue that reversing the adoption now would be detrimental to the child's well-being. We can win this, but only if you don't do anything stupid." Julian's jaw clenched. "Stupid like acknowledging that Ethan's mother is alive and deserves to be in his life? Stupid like voluntarily giving up your son to someone who has no resources, no legal status, and could be deported at any moment," Gerald shot back. "Think, Julian. What kind of life can she offer him? She's a housekeeper living in poverty. You're a billionaire who can provide everything." "Any judge would side with you." The words hit Amara like physical blows. Julian watched her face crumble, watched her wrap her arms around herself as if trying to hold together pieces that were breaking apart. "I'll call you back," Julian said coldly, and hung up, but the damage was done. "He's right," Amara whispered, her voice hollow. "I have nothing. I can't even afford my own apartment. How can I fight for my son when I can barely take care of myself?" "Amara, no." She stepped back from the crib, from Ethan, her hands shaking. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should have just stayed away. He has a good life here. He has you. What do I have to offer him except poverty and trauma and—" "His mother," Julian said fiercely. "You offer him his mother. That's not nothing. That's everything." But before Amara could respond, Julian's phone buzzed with a news alert. His heart sank as he read the headline, "Billionaire Julian Bourne fights to keep stolen child from biological mother." "What?" Julian's hands went numb. "I never said I didn't—" He opened the article. Anonymous sources close to Bourne claimed he was preparing a legal battle to maintain custody, arguing that returning the child to his impoverished biological mother would be harmful. Quotes from legal experts discussing how wealth and stability would likely win over biological rights. His lawyer had leaked it. Gerald had gone to the press to build public sympathy before Julian could stop him. "No, no, no," Julian breathed. He looked at Amara, whose face had gone ashen. "I didn't authorize this. I didn't—" His phone exploded with new messages. His publicist. "Perfect. Let me build on this narrative. Single father, tragic loss, best interests of the child. We can paint this as you protecting Ethan from instability." His brother. "Smart move. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment. Fight for your son." Board members expressing relief that he was being practical. They all assumed he wanted to keep Amara away. They all assumed he would use his power to crush her. And watching Amara's face, seeing the hope drain from her eyes, seeing her retreat into herself like she was disappearing, Julian realized that's exactly what was happening. Even without his permission, his wealth, his influence, his system was weaponizing itself against her. "I should go," Amara said quietly, backing toward the door. "Before this gets worse, before they turn you into the villain for showing me kindness." "Amara, wait!" But she was already moving, her survival instincts kicking in, the same instincts that had kept her alive through genocide, refugee camps, and 2 years of searching for her stolen child. She reached the nursery door and paused, looking back at Ethan one last time. "Take care of him," she whispered. "Love him enough for both of us. That's all I ever wanted." And then she was gone. Julian started to follow, but his phone rang again, this time an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Mr. Bourne?" A woman's voice, cold and official. "This is Agent Sarah Chen with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to speak with you about Amara Strider's visa status. We have reason to believe she may have obtained her work visa under false pretenses, and given her involvement in this high-profile case—" Julian's blood turned to ice. "What are you saying?" "We're opening a deportation investigation. She'll need to report to our offices within 48 hours, or a warrant will be issued for her arrest. We wanted to inform you as a courtesy, given your connection to the case." The line went dead. Julian stood frozen, his mind reeling. They were going to deport her. His lawyer was preparing to fight her in court. The media was painting him as the hero protecting a child from an unfit mother. And Amara, brave, broken Amara, was about to lose her son all over again. Only this time it would be Julian's system, Julian's world. Julian's privilege that took Samuel away from her. He looked down at Ethan, who had finally woken up and was gazing at him with innocent, trusting eyes. "I'm sorry," Julian whispered to his son. "I'm so sorry." Because he'd promised to protect Ethan from everything, but he hadn't realized he'd need to protect him from the very system Julian himself had helped build. A system that treated children as property, that valued wealth over love, that could steal a mother's child twice and call it justice. Julian had a choice to make. He could let it happen, keep his son, maintain his reputation, let Amara disappear back into the shadows where society expected her to stay. Or he could burn it all down, his career, his reputation, his carefully constructed life. He could fight the system that had given him everything, and pray it would be enough to give Amara back her son. Julian didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office, surrounded by legal documents, immigration files, and adoption records, searching for a way to stop the machine he'd accidentally set in motion. Every path led to the same dead end. The system was designed to protect people like him and discard people like Amara. But at 3 a.m., staring at the forged death certificate that had stolen 2 years of Amara's life, something inside Julian snapped. He wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. He picked up his phone and called Regina Moss. "I need you to find Amara," he said without preamble, "before ICE does, and I need you to do something else, something that's going to make a lot of powerful people very angry." "I'm listening," Regina said. "I want you to contact every single family connected to Chen's network. Every parent who adopted through ICWA, every biological mother who was told their child was going to a better life. I want you to bring them together. Julian, that's 17 families. The legal chaos alone—" "I don't care about the chaos," Julian interrupted. "These people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know they're not alone. And they deserve the choice to do what's right, even if it costs them everything." There was a long pause. "You're going to hold a press conference," Regina said slowly. "You're going to expose the entire network publicly and invite the other families to come forward." "Yes." "Julian, your lawyer will have a heart attack. Your foundation's board will force you to resign. The media will crucify you for admitting you adopted a stolen child. You could lose everything." "I've already lost everything that matters," Julian said quietly. "Because if I keep Ethan by letting Amara be destroyed, then I'm no better than Chen. I'm just another person who used my privilege to take someone's child." He took a breath. "Find her, Regina, and set up the press conference for tomorrow. I'm done hiding." Regina found Amara at a women's shelter in Brooklyn, the same place she'd stayed when she first arrived in America 18 months ago. When Julian walked through the door at dawn, he found her sitting on a narrow cot, holding Samuel's baby blanket, her eyes red and swollen. She looked up, startled. "How did you—" "I need you to trust me," Julian said, kneeling in front of her. "One more time. I know you have every reason not to. I know my world has done nothing but hurt you, but I'm asking you to trust me anyway." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "They're going to deport me. ICE called me an hour ago. I have to report tomorrow, or they'll issue a warrant." "They're not going to deport you," Julian said firmly, "because by tomorrow the entire world is going to know what happened to you, what happened to Samuel, what happened to every mother Chen stole from." He pulled out his phone and showed her the email he'd drafted, a statement that would go out to every major news outlet in the country. Amara read it, her hands trembling. It was a full confession, an acknowledgement that Julian had unknowingly adopted a stolen child, a call for other families to come forward, a demand for systemic change, and a public commitment to share custody with Amara, regardless of what the law said his rights were. "If you release this," Amara whispered, "you'll lose everything." "Not everything," Julian said. "I'll still have a chance to be the man Caroline believed I was, the man Ethan deserves as a father, and I'll still have the opportunity to do the right thing, even if it's too late to undo the wrong." He reached out and took her hand. "Come with me. Stand beside me at the press conference. Tell your story. Let the world see what the system does to mothers like you. Let them see what happened when you dared to search for your stolen son." "And if it doesn't work?" Amara asked, her voice breaking. "If they still deport me? If they still take him away?" "Then at least we fought," Julian said. "Together, the way we should have from the beginning." Amara stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for any trace of deception, and then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's fight." The press conference was held at noon in the lobby of Julian's Foundation headquarters. Every major news outlet was there. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters packed the room. Julian stood at the podium, Amara beside him, both of them terrified and resolved. "My name is Julian Bourne," he began, his voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. "8 months ago, I adopted a baby boy through what I believed was a legitimate humanitarian organization. I was told his mother had died during childbirth. I was told I was giving an orphan a home." He paused, looking directly into the cameras. "I was lied to. The organization, International Child Welfare Alliance, run by Dr. Roche, Raymond Chen, was trafficking stolen children. My son was not an orphan. His mother is standing beside me right now. Her name is Amara Strider, and 2 years ago her baby was taken from her through fraud, coercion, and forged documents." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Julian raised his hand for silence. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to expose a system that allowed this to happen. A system that treats vulnerable mothers as disposable and their children as commodities. A system that prioritizes wealth over love and paperwork over humanity." He turned to Amara, nodding for her to speak. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. "My name is Amara Strider. I am Samuel's mother. For 2 years I have searched for my son, believing he was lost to me forever. I came to this country with nothing, no money, no connections, no power. I cleaned floors in the building where my stolen child slept, and no one saw me. No one heard me, because people like me are invisible." Her voice grew stronger. "But I am not invisible anymore, and neither are the other mothers whose children were stolen. We deserve to be heard, we deserve justice, and we deserve our children back." The room fell silent. Then from the back, a woman stood up, one of the other adoptive mothers Regina had contacted. "My name is Jennifer Keaton," she said, her voice trembling, "and I think my daughter was stolen too." Another parent stood, then another, and another. Within minutes, 12 of the 17 families connected to ICWA were on their feet, some crying, some angry. All united in the horrifying realization that they had been deceived. Julian looked at Amara, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he saw hope blazing in her eyes. They weren't alone anymore, and together they were going to tear down the system that had stolen their children. The press conference ignited a firestorm. Within hours, the story was trending worldwide. Social media exploded with hashtags. "Bring them home," "Stolen not orphaned," "Justice for Amara." News outlets ran 24-hour coverage. Politicians scrambled to respond. International human rights organizations launched investigations. But while the world raged, Julian and Amara faced their most critical battle, the emergency custody hearing scheduled for the next morning. Despite public pressure, the legal system moved slowly, and Gerald Hutchins wasn't backing down. He'd filed motions arguing that regardless of how the adoption occurred, reversing it now would traumatize Ethan and destabilize his life. "He's technically right," Regina told them the night before the hearing. "Family court prioritizes the child's best interests above all else, even biological rights. The judge could rule that Ethan stays with Julian while Amara gets supervised visitation. Or worse, nothing at all until the international legalities are sorted out, which could take years." "Years?" Amara's voice broke. "I've already lost 2 years." Julian's jaw clenched. "Then we need something the judge can't ignore, something that proves Ethan belongs with both of us." "Like what?" Regina asked. Julian looked at Amara, an idea forming, risky, unconventional, but possibly their only shot. "Like showing the judge exactly what Ethan wants." The courtroom was packed the next morning. Reporters, advocates, other families from Chen's network, all waiting to see if justice would prevail or if the system would protect its own. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, a stern woman in her 60s, known for her no-nonsense approach and deep commitment to children's welfare. Gerald presented his case first, painting a picture of stability. Julian's wealth, his devotion, the trauma that separation would cause. "Your Honor, this child knows only one parent, Julian Bourne. To remove him now, regardless of how the adoption occurred, would be cruel. Mr. Bourne has committed to providing financial support to Ms. Strider and is willing to discuss visitation arrangements, but full custody should remain." "Objection?" Amara's lawyer interrupted, a legal aid attorney named David Kim, who'd taken her case pro bono after the press conference. "The defense is asking this court to reward child trafficking by allowing the illegal adoption to stand." "Mr. Bourne was an unwitting victim," Gerald countered. "He had no knowledge. Neither did my client when she signed documents she couldn't read," David shot back. "Yet she lost her child. Why does Mr. Bourne's ignorance protect him while hers condemned her?" Judge Morrison raised her hand. "Enough. I've read the case files. I've seen the DNA evidence. I've reviewed Dr. Chen's fraudulent practices. What I need to determine is not who is at fault, but what serves this child's best interests going forward." She looked at Julian. "Mr. Bourne." "Approach the bench." Julian stood, his heart hammering. "You've made quite a spectacle of this case," Judge Morrison said. "Public confessions, press conferences, very dramatic. But this is a courtroom, not a stage. Tell me plainly, what do you want?" Julian took a breath. "Your Honor, I want what's best for my son, and what's best for him is having both of his parents in his life, equally, fully, without one of us being reduced to supervised visits or legal footnotes." "You're proposing shared custody?" "I'm proposing we tear up the playbook," Julian said. "Ms. Strider and I have drawn up an agreement. We want to co-parent Ethan, Samuel, together. Joint legal and physical custody. We've arranged for her to move into a residence near mine, so transitions are easy for him. I'll provide financial support not as charity, but as investment in our son's mother being stable and present." Gerald shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "So is international child trafficking, Counselor," Judge Morrison said dryly. She turned to Amara. "Ms. Strider, approach." Amara stood, her legs shaking. "You've been through hell," the judge said quietly, "and I cannot imagine the strength it took to stand in that press conference and tell your story. but I need to know. Can you truly co-parent with the man who, even unknowingly, adopted your stolen child? Or will resentment poison this arrangement and hurt your son in the process?" Amara's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "Your Honor, I spent 2 years hating the people who took my baby. But Julian Bourne didn't take him. Dr. Chen did. Julian loved Samuel when I couldn't. He kept him safe when I couldn't. He's been the father I wished I could have given my son." She looked at Julian. "I don't resent him. I'm grateful to him. And Samuel deserves both of us. The father who raised him and the mother who never stopped searching." Judge Morrison studied them both for a long moment. Then she did something unprecedented. "Bring the child into my chambers. I want to see how he responds to both of you." 10 minutes later, Julian and Amara stood in the judge's private chambers while a social worker brought in Ethan. The moment Ethan saw Julian, he reached for him immediately, the familiar comfort of the only father he'd known. Julian took him, and Ethan settled against his chest. But then Ethan saw Amara, and something remarkable happened. The baby who never went to strangers, who screamed when anyone but Julian or Mrs. Pemberton tried to hold him, reached out his tiny hand toward Amara, not with fear, with recognition. Amara's breath caught. Tears streamed down her face as she stepped closer. "Hi, baby," she whispered in her native language, a lullaby phrase she'd sung to him every night for 4 months. "Hi, my Samuel. Mama's here." Ethan's eyes widened, his hand stretched further. And then he did something that made everyone in the room freeze. He made the same sound, the exact same cooing sound that he'd made as an infant, the sound Amara had recorded on her phone 2 years ago and played every night since. The sound only she would recognize, the sound of her son calling for her. Judge Morrison's eyes glistened. Even the court reporter looked moved. "Mr. Bourne," the judge said quietly, "let Ms. Strider hold him." Julian moved closer to Amara, gently transferring Ethan into her arms. And Ethan, miracle of miracles, didn't cry. He nestled against his mother's chest, his tiny hand clutching her shirt, and released a deep, contented sigh, like he'd finally come home. Amara sobbed, holding her son for the first time in 2 years, whispering promises in words he couldn't understand, but somehow knew meant love. Julian stood beside them, his own tears falling freely, his hand coming to rest on Ethan's back. 3 people, 2 parents, 1 child, 1 family, broken, rebuilt, and stronger for having survived. Judge Morrison cleared her throat. "I've seen enough. We're going back into the courtroom." 5 minutes later, she delivered her ruling. Joint legal and physical custody effective immediately. Mr. Bourne and Ms. Strider will share parenting responsibilities equally. The child will retain the name Ethan Bourne, with Samuel as his middle name. Both parents will have equal say in all major decisions regarding his upbringing. She looked at both of them. "You're being given a second chance, both of you. Don't waste it." The courtroom erupted in applause. Julian turned to Amara and, without thinking, pulled her into an embrace. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." Amara held Ethan between them, laughing and crying at once. "We did," she breathed. "Together." 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Julian's penthouse as Amara sang softly in the kitchen, preparing Ethan's breakfast while he sat in his high chair, babbling happily and banging a spoon against the tray. Julian emerged from his office, smiling at the scene that had become his new normal, his new life. "Good morning," he said, pressing a kiss to Ethan's head before pouring himself coffee. "Good morning," Amara replied, her smile warm and genuine. "He slept through the night for the first time." "Really?" Julian's eyes lit up. "That's amazing." "I think he finally feels safe," Amara said softly, her eyes meeting Julian's. "We all do." The past 6 months had been a journey neither of them could have imagined. After the custody ruling, they'd spent countless hours in family therapy, learning to navigate co-parenting, building trust, and healing from the trauma that had brought them together. Amara had moved into a beautiful apartment 2 floors below Julian's penthouse, close enough for Ethan to move freely between both homes, far enough for both parents to maintain their independence and privacy. Julian had established a foundation in Ethan's name, the Samuel Ethan Foundation, dedicated to reforming international adoption practices and reuniting families separated by trafficking. The foundation had already helped 12 families from Chen's network reconnect and had lobbied successfully for stricter oversight of international adoption agencies. Dr. Raymond Chen was serving a 15-year sentence for child trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy. 17 other officials across 3 countries had been arrested. The pipeline that had stolen children under the guise of humanitarian aid had been permanently dismantled. But the most beautiful transformation had happened right here, in the quiet moments between 2 people who had started as adversaries and had become something neither expected: partners, friends, and maybe, just maybe, something more. "I got an email from David yesterday," Amara said, referring to her lawyer who had become a close friend. "The immigration court finalized my permanent residency. I'm staying, Julian, officially." Julian's heart swelled. "That's incredible, Amara. You've worked so hard for this." "We worked hard for this," she corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." Their eyes held for a moment charged with everything they'd been dancing around for months. The late-night conversations over tea while Ethan slept, the lingering touches when they passed him between them. The way Julian's heart raced every time Amara smiled, the way Amara felt safe for the first time in years whenever Julian was near. Before either could speak, the doorbell rang. Julian opened it to find Regina Moss standing there with a thick envelope. "I have something for you both," she said, stepping inside. "The final piece." She handed the envelope to Amara, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside were documents, official documents from the Rwandan government. "Your original parental rights have been restored," Regina explained. "The government formally acknowledged the fraud committed against you and 17 other mothers. They've apologized publicly and are implementing new safeguards. Your signature has been cleared from every fraudulent document. Samuel's birth certificate has been corrected to show you as his legal mother from the moment he was born." Amara's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "It's really over?" "It's really over," Regina confirmed. "You're his mother, legally and irrevocably. No one can ever take that from you again." Amara collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. Julian knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her as she released 2 years of pain, fear, and uncertainty. "Thank you," she whispered into his shoulder. "Thank you for believing me, for fighting with me, for giving me back my son." "Thank you for trusting me," Julian whispered back, "for teaching me what it really means to love someone, putting their needs above everything else, even when it costs you everything." They pulled apart slightly, and Julian found himself looking into Amara's eyes, beautiful, strong, full of life that had been almost extinguished, but had fought its way back. "Amara," he said softly, "these past 6 months with you, They've been the happiest of my life since Caroline died. You've brought light back into this home. You've shown Ethan what a mother's love looks like, and you've shown me what courage really means." Amara's breath caught. "Julian, I'm not asking you to feel the same way," he continued quickly. "I know everything between us started in tragedy. I know we're still healing. But I need you to know that when I look at you, I don't just see Ethan's mother. I see an extraordinary woman who crossed an ocean to find her child, who stood up to a system designed to crush her, who chose forgiveness over bitterness and partnership over vengeance." He took her hand. "I see someone I'm falling in love with, and if there's any chance at all, that someday you might feel the same—" Amara pressed her finger to his lips, silencing him. Then she smiled through her tears. "Julian Bourne, you gave me back my son. You gave me back my voice. You gave me back my life. How could I not love you?" Julian's heart stopped. You love me?" "I think I started falling for you the moment you chose truth over comfort," Amara whispered. "The moment you risked everything to do what was right. You're not just Ethan's father. You're the best man I've ever known." Julian cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, softly, reverently, like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. Behind them, Ethan squealed with delight, banging his spoon louder as if celebrating. They broke apart, laughing, and turned to their son, their miracle, their bridge, their reason for everything. "What do you think, buddy?" Julian asked, scooping Ethan into his arms. "Should Mama and Daddy try this thing called being a real family?" Ethan reached out, placing one tiny hand on Julian's cheek and the other on Amara's, pulling them together. And in that moment, surrounded by love that had been stolen, fought for, and finally reclaimed, 3 broken pieces became whole. 1 year later, the small courthouse wedding was attended only by close friends, Regina, David, Mrs. Pemberton, and a handful of families from the foundation who had become like extended family. Ethan, now almost 2 years old, toddled down the aisle in a tiny suit, carrying rings on a pillow with Regina's help. And when Julian and Amara exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through whatever storms might come, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "I promise to never stop fighting for you," Julian said, slipping the ring onto Amara's finger. "I promise to never stop believing in us," Amara replied, her voice strong and clear. They kissed as husband and wife, and Ethan cheered, clapping his hands. The family that trauma had broken, love had rebuilt. The child that a corrupt system had stolen, justice had restored. And the 2 people who should have been enemies had become the greatest love story neither of them saw coming.